Cherie and Hare. Age unprovided. Date statement taken 18th of the 7th 2022. Time 2:05 p.m. Location Auckland Airport Police Station. I, Cherie Ann Hare, state. Cherie Ann Hare is my full name. I am a sworn police member holding the rank of Senior Constable, currently based at the Auckland International Airport, Section 3. My role is a first responder, public safety team member at the airport. On the 16th July 2022, I was working early shift with Senior Constable Schuster. At approximately 9:15 a.m. we received information from airport monitoring over the police radio on the airport channel. The information was that Skygate Security requested assistance. The information was that the Skygate Security requested assistance relating to a disorderly male at the domestic terminal Jetstar. Upon arrival at the domestic terminal, the Skygate security officer, Nicholas Mckindo, pointed out the male at the Jetstar check-in counter. He stated the male had been filming people and he had asked him to stop. The male pointed out to me was leaning across a female who was on the public side of the Jetstar counter. He had his cell phone up to the Jetstar passenger service manager, filming her as she worked. I approached the male along with Senior Constable Schuster and engaged in conversation with him. I identified the defendant as the male before the court, in brackets, ID defendant. I asked the defendant whether he was the lady he had been leaning over, to which he answered he wasn't. The defendant immediately filmed Senior Constable Schuster's identification and proceeded to do the same with mine. However, I put my hand up, blocking his view. He had his cell phone in very close proximity to our faces as he filmed the situation. I listened to what the defendant had to say as he stated he was going to fly to Queenstown and had the problems he was having with Jetstar. I asked the defendant to put his phone away several times, however he refused. I asked him to move away from the check-in area where there was more space so we could talk about what had happened. The defendant continued to refuse every request I put to him, being argumentative and confrontational. I continued to ask him several times to put his phone away from my face. He continued filming my face, which was very intimidating and offensive, as he was in my personal space and breaching my right not to be recorded. I put my hand up to the defendant's arm, redirected the phone away from my face. I stated to the defendant that the airport was a private place and recordings were not allowed. He argued that it was a public place. Once I realized he was not going to move on, I told him he was trespassed from the airport. I asked him to move on. The defendant became loud and obnoxious, refusing to move. I warned the defendant that he could be arrested for trespass if he did not move on. Still, the situation continued with him arguing. I told the defendant he was under arrest for trespass. I physically directed the defendant away from the check-in area by placing my hand on his back, communicating with him as to what was happening. I placed one handcuff on the defendant's left wrist. I asked him to put his hands behind his back several times, however he refused, squeezing his left hand into a fist, pulling, yanking, and resisting my grip. A female approached and took the defendant's phone from him. The defendant ordered the female to film the police. The female filmed the incident from that point. The defendant grabbed onto my police uniform, long-sleeved jersey, restraining me by the garment. I held on to the handcuffs as tight as I possibly could to prevent the defendant from pulling them from my grip. The defendant held his arms in front of him and gripped his hands together, preventing his arms from being placed behind his back. Senior Constable Chester linked his left arm around the defendant's right arm, and I linked my right arm with the defendant's left arm. We physically directed the defendant out of the building into the forecourt, where he continued to resist from being restrained. I attempted at that point to state the Bill of Rights. However, the defendant continued to yell at me in an aggressive manner. The female continued filming the incident. I asked her to put the phone away. However, she also refused, with the defendant yelling at her to also film the police. Once both handcuffs were on the defendant, we physically directed him a short distance to the patrol car. The defendant continued to resist, using his body weight to pull at me as I endeavoured to open the patrol car. The defendant was very aggressive, both in his body movements, mannerisms, and facial expressions. Once the defendant was seated in the patrol car with the back door still open, I gave him his Bill of Rights as I stood on the footpath by saying, "You have the right to remain silent. You do not have to make any statement. Anything you say may be recorded and may be given in evidence in court. You have the right to speak with a lawyer without delay and in private before deciding whether to answer any questions. Police have a list of lawyers you may speak to for free." I asked the defendant whether he understood his rights. He stated he was exercising his right to silence. Once at the airport police station, the defendant sat facing the wall with his back to the police. He was asked to give his details, however he continued to whistle and shake his head, saying nothing. He scoffed when choices were put to him and did not answer. The defendant was asked if he wanted to make a statement, to which he said nothing. Sky Security had located the defendant's accompanying female. She gave her details to the officer as, "I made inquiries on my mobility device to find the defendant's details who was linked with the female." The defendant was taken to the Manukau police station, where he was granted police bail to appear on the 22nd of July 2022. As a result of the struggle with the defendant as I gripped onto the handcuffs, I received bruising to my right hand. I took a photograph of the bruising as an exhibit, in brackets, pro exhibit. On the 18th of July 2022, I received information from Sky Security that the recorded incident had been released on YouTube. I viewed the footage and recorded it off the police computer onto my mobility device. I saved the footage onto the police file for evidence. I produced that footage as an exhibit, and in brackets, pro exhibit. I confirm the truth and accuracy of this statement. I make this statement with the knowledge that it is to be used in court proceedings. I am aware that it is an offence to make a statement that is known by me to be false or intended by me to be misled. It is signed by Cherie and Hare.